through a home care package. If you are interested in becoming a volunteer to help support older people to live meaningful lives and build social connections, or you would like to access the service, please contact Gemma on 0477883942 or visit lifelinetasmania.org.au for more information.
There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Alright, welcome here to episode 112 of Media Mothership, broadcasting as always out of Edge Radio Studios in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. On Media Mothership, we explore how media can shape our understanding of the world around us. I'm your host, Craig Norris, and we're streaming on edgeradio.org.au, as well as on YouTube and Twitch. You can find us just by searching Media Mothership, as well as on your DAB. Message us if you've got inquiries or interests, or this provokes you in any way, via the chat on YouTube or Twitch, or SMS us directly here into the studio on 048888 11707. So, welcome to today's episode 112, and we're going to be covering some news stories, Star Wars news, lost guitar from Back to the Future news, and artificial intelligence in the Chinese movie industry. Then we're going to deep dive, picking up where we left off in the previous episode, where we explored the famous late 30s radio suspense horror drama piece, Chicken Heart, and the thoughts of Stephen King, and, strangely, the problematic Bill Cosby. We'll be picking up with some further thoughts of Stephen King from his book, Danse Macabre, and how that can make some really interesting radio relevancy points today. So all that and more on Media Mothership. Groovy. Let's start with some news. So, first bit of odd news that's come across my desk was from the Star Wars Battlefront 2 game, which I did play a little bit back in the day. Surprisingly, Kotaku's reporting a resurgence in this game with concurrent player statistics going through the roof in Steam. It seems this old game from a few decades ago, does it mention where it is? The 8-year-old shooter. So it's the summer of Star Wars Battlefront 2 as the 8-year-old shooter breaks Steam records and fans beg for a sequel. Marred by loot boxes at launch, Andor has helped the shooter come roaring back. So Andor, of course, the successful kind of spin-off prequel TV series on Netflix, or is it Disney Plus? No, Disney Plus. They've gobbled up all of Star Wars stuff. Anyway, the Andor series season 2 came out a little bit ago, and met with positive critical and fan reviews, and interestingly has caused a number of peripheral media texts, such as a video game released 8 years ago, Star Wars Battlefront 2, to suddenly become record-breaking popular again. Interesting because, it bombed, or it met with a moral backlash from fans when it launched because of a sense of exploitative loot box kind of behavior and paywall behavior. I think it was, you Luke Skywalker's, your big characters were locked behind a paywall, and there was a sense of moral outrage that you've already bought the game, but then you have to pay for all these loot box type phenomena. So it copped a huge backlash at the time. However, 8 years since today, suddenly we're hitting the charts again. So the article is pointing out this probably is due to renewed interest sparked by Andor. It's gone incredibly well and it's reignited fan enthusiasm for various bits and pieces of Star Wars as well as this video game. Now, one of the actors that played a kind of rebel saboteur in the Andor Season 2 series, the actor Muhammad Ben Amor, has publicly shared his nostalgia for the game in a tweet, causing a bit of viral interest in this, right? So he used a tweet to highlight his nostalgia of having played this game 8 years ago and his enjoyment of it, and his shout out for a new version of it. Another reason for it, probably as the article points out, is the game's super cheap. You can pick it up for $4 US on PC. So, it's a really cheap game to get, and suggests, there's probably quite a bit of desire for it. Interesting, given again the backlash the game first copped from the microtransactions that were their classic case of a moral economy, where the fans feel that their only recourse is to boycott the game and review bomb it and so forth. So even though it did cop a huge negative critical fan backlash at the time, years on, it's actually being embraced as a really, really great little game. It's certainly, the first one I played, a lot of fun. We could certainly see this, friend of the show, cultural theorist John Fisk, would probably see this as a great piece of nostalgia. Right, particularly the viral return of Battlefront 2, fueled here by tweets and memes, as well as the actor from Andor giving it a shout out. Fisk would probably refer to his classic term, semiotic productivity, going down here, where the fans are semiotically grabbing little signs and signifiers and signifieds of the Battlefield 2 franchise, circulating it. And it's interesting how a lot of these tweets are, again, classic nostalgia. The golden age, the better time that was back in that period where Battlefield 2 launched. Forgetting, of course, it was full of controversy. So it's fascinating, I guess, contrast to the initial launch and the... give it a bit of nostalgia, and suddenly it's embraced, right? From once being vilified to being reclaimed, I guess, today as a really cheap, moddable, little nostalgic piece of fun. And I guess a positive spin on this, which I think Fisk himself would be really happy to see, is seeing this as maybe a subversion of the original capitalist corporate intent that this Battlefield 2 game had. So instead, the storytelling of Battlefront 2 is all about the fans themselves creating their own pleasure out of it, and finally getting beyond the kind of corporate intent behind the initial launch of it. So a bit of power to the people, maybe, certainly taking a leaf there out of Fisk's book. Being a perfect fan, where the fans here asserting a bit of cultural agency, getting out of the constraints of a corporate media if you want to have a generous interpretation of it, which might certainly be the case. Again, other friend of the show, Stuart Hall, would probably see this as an article that's kind of speaking to that negotiated reading, where the article itself and the players themselves acknowledge the game's problematic launch, but they're negotiating it today. They're reinterpreting it as a nostalgic, more community-driven experience, and maybe there'd be some fans that would straight out do an oppositional reading. That they reject entirely that this is now a corporate framing piece, and and that that monetization's disappeared from it. Possibly interesting little thought there. On Battlefront 2, are you playing Battlefront 2 now? Has Andor gotten you into any Star Wars paratexts like Battlefront 2? Or even diving immediately into Rogue One, the movie that the Andor series sets up? Maybe. All right, talking to, I guess, fan engagement, let's go to our next story on the system. This one is coming out of IGN.com. It is an article. Michael J. Fox says the search is on for Marty McFly's lost guitar from Back to the Future. Wow, let's that sink in for a bit. So Michael J. Fox, of course, the actor playing Marty McFly in the classic Back to the Future trilogy, he and the guitar maker Gibson have launched a public search for the cherry red Gibson ES345 guitar that he played as Marty McFly during the Enchantment Under the Sea scene in Back to the Future classic. So they've posted wanted posters and YouTube video campaigns everywhere where Michael J. Fox is talking, as well as fellow cast members Leah Thompson and Christopher Lloyd. Even Huey Lewis has got into it, talking about trying to track down this cherry red Gibson, and they're trying to. It allegedly went missing after the film, and they've never been able to find it again. So fans, they're encouraging fans to share any leads they might have. They've set up a dedicated website and tip line for anyone out there that might have anything that helps their search. Interestingly, of course, you might be a little bit cautious of this news, thinking, what's caused this all of a sudden? Well, there's a documentary project that this is tied into called Lost to the Future, which is also being promoted in this search for the guitar. So it's been missing for 40 years. And it's going to be, as the article says and the team themselves have acknowledged, very difficult to track down this object due to the amount of time that's passed. Right? There weren't any records. It seems they've been able to grab. Memories are pretty faded from this 1980s classic period. The 40th anniversary of the film is coming around, so again, there'll be a lot of interest in this. And, again, you could think skeptically, I guess, if you were thinking about this in terms of, friend of the show, Stuart Hall's encoding-decoding model, right? The preferred reading will be, isn't this nice? Right? They're inviting the audience to engage in this, bit of forensic fandom, hunt down this guitar, a bit of shared cultural memory. Some might be a little bit more skeptical, doing a bit of a negotiated reading, saying that, this is a heartfelt gesture, but it's also a very clever marketing strategy, given the 40th anniversary of Back to the Future is coming up, and there's a couple of projects that they're promoting through it, such as the new documentary. So, you could just take a pure oppositional reading and say this whole thing is pure commodification of my sentimental values. We'll see. I mean, the Jaws 50th anniversary just passed last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. And there's a great little doco of the Jaws 50th that's running, I think, on Netflix, which is a real treat. Again, so there are a number of really fascinating anniversaries, which are causing some really fascinating documentaries. Now that Blu-rays and DVDs are not the main platform to engage with media, which is a shame, or movies, because those Blu-rays used to have great making-of sequences, commentaries. So streaming services lack a lot of that, so it's interesting that we're getting some of these behind-the-scenes documentary material making its way into streaming services now, where previously we would have enjoyed them on a Blu-ray or DVD. So yeah, look, I mean, interesting little question if they're going to be able to find this guitar. You know, I guess the value of this guitar. It is iconic. It's a key scene in the movie. So it's certainly one which is really important. But, you know, as the guitar itself, as the article itself says, you know, the guitar might be lost in the space-time continuum. Who knows? Who knows if our kind of desire for this object will ever result in something we can find. Last article. All right, another article from IGN. Interesting little piece I came across titled "Chinese Studios Planning AI Remakes of the Classic Kung Fu Films of Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li." Yeah, dramatic. So Chinese film studios are launching, it seems, a major AI-driven project to remake 100 classic kung fu films, including those of Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li. Title of this project is Kung Fu Movie Heritage Project. It's been announced at the Shanghai International Film Festival back in June 19th. They're going to be doing AI remakes of classic films like Fist of Fury, Drunken Master, and Once Upon a Time in China, as well as John Woo's classic kind of noir detective drama thriller action piece, A Better Tomorrow. Great film. This one they're going to reimagine as a cyberpunk themed animated feature. So that'll be really unusual. It's claimed to be the first fully AI-produced animated film. Wow. The initiative is backed by a 100 million yuan fund, so that's around $13.9 million, and will involve major partners like the China Film Foundation and Quantum Animation. Studios assert the project will enhance sound, image, and production levels while paying tribute to the originals. Movie comes amid broader debates, of course, in creative industries about the use of artificial intelligence, some calling it disturbing, others urging filmmakers to embrace it. Really troubling. When I was reading through this article, the first friend of the show theorist I thought of course, was Zizek. What would Zizek say about this? And one of my favorite little media pieces you can watch, it's on YouTube, a couple of other servers, is called The Pervert's Guide to Cinema by Zizek. It's absolutely fantastic. It goes through in his bizarre Lacanian psychoanalytical fashion an interpretation of key classic films from Hollywood, everything from Taxi Driver to The Birds, as well as the one which came to mind, which was his interpretation of The Matrix. Because I find this really fascinating that, you know, this article about Chinese AI reimagining, redoing these classic kung fu films and action films, 100 of them, what this reproduction is going to eventuate with. I mean, Zizek's analysis of The Matrix is quite interesting. I mean, Zizek would probably see this Kung Fu Movie Heritage Project as a kind of, ideological fantasy machine. Are they going to preserve the past as they're claiming, or really reshape and remake how we relate to these icons of Kung Fu cinema? Jackie Chan, Jet Li. Is it going to be sanitized? Are they going to sanitize it? Is it going to go full postmodern, hyper-real version of these martial art films? It would be interesting to see if that kind of realness of the originals, the kind of raw, unfiltered intensity of someone like a Bruce Lee, that physicality of it, or the kind of chaotic slapstick of Jackie Chan, given they're doing Drunken Master as well, is it going to be completely overwritten by the type of AI polishing that's going to go on here, or redoing, as in the case of A Better Tomorrow, where they're turning it into an animated, purely AI-created animated film. It'd be fascinating to see how the AI is going to remake it. Let's listen to the scene from The Matrix, which Zizek analyzes to give us a taste of how maybe someone like Zizek would approach this.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
But the choice between the blue and the red pill is not really a choice between illusion and reality. Of course, Matrix is a machine for fictions, but these are fictions which already structure our reality. If you take away from our reality the symbolic fictions that regulate it, you lose reality itself. I want a third pill. So what is the third pill? Definitely not some kind of transcendental pill which enables a fake fast food religious experience, but a pill that would enable me to perceive not the reality behind the illusion, but the reality in illusion itself. If something gets too traumatic, too violent, even too filled in with enjoyment, it shatters the coordinates of our reality. We have to fictionalize it.
So, some really interesting points there made by Zizek from The Pervert's Guide to Cinema, talking about The Matrix. Similarly here, I think an interesting moment in terms of, I guess the Chinese AI system offering us two choices. One is that kind of, we go back to the originals, or we take the blue pill, which will transport us into this kind of perfected AI space, which will, simulate that reality. Or, as Zizek says, he wants that third pill option. And maybe here's the real crux, right? Much like Zizek would say, perhaps the true perversion isn't in watching these AI remakes, but in enjoying them, right? Is that the true perversion? If it's not the question of, yes, these AI remakes, this concept seems perverted, but would the real perversion be then the experience of watching them and actually discovering an enjoyment of them? Would that be the perhaps true perversion, as the theorist Zizek might argue? Fascinating. So, yeah, I guess watch that space. Chinese studios planning AI remakes of classic kung fu films of Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li. There you go. Well, that's unfiltered, real playing. No AI in that thumb piano live studio. Keep it real. Let's move on now to the main topic of today's discussion, which brings us back to last episode, where we're unpacking the classic horror drama from 1936, Chicken Heart. And we were approaching it through Stephen King's Danse Macabre book, which takes an analysis of the horror genre from writing and film. And then we were looking at how other media identities of the time, including Bill Cosby, incorporated aspects of Chicken Heart into their own routine to show its impact, the impact of radio, the impact of listening. Now, one of the points that Stephen King brings up is his love for how radio worked on him as a child to create these, what would be referred to as the theater of the mind, or as King refers to it, the eye's mind, the eye and the mind, that we're not visually seeing what's happening. We're having to use what some people would argue is a more imaginatively creative effort to visualize it in our own mind. So King's book, and certainly the chapter that he's going on talking about the importance and significance of early radio dramas that he watched as a kid growing up, is his lament for this medium's vanishing at that point when Danse Macabre came out in the 80s. Television had fully dominated what previously radio was maybe filling. So radio dramas, people performing radio dramas had pretty much disappeared. You maybe had the radio drama of the Star Wars New Hope film, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. BBC was doing a lot, but really pretty small. Basically, radio drama had become a vanished medium by that point. And he was critiquing, in some ways, the classic kind of media panic of it being a more passive form of media consumption than radio. Right? And he was reflecting on radio, unlike television, demanding more imagination and more active engagement from its audience than television does. It's a bit of a tension that comes about when any disruptive technology occurs and causes a sense of we will lose something in the transition. So much like the previous article talking about what we might lose with artificial intelligence, right? If we're going to get these AI versions of films, classic films like, Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury, what will be lost, right? We won't have the raw, authentic effort there. We'll lose the comedic slapstick performance of your Jackie Chan. It'll just be an AI-created effort, and won't that have lost something from it? So similarly here, King was bemoaning and critiquing what will be lost as we're moving from radio to television, from the 50s through then to the 80s, as King was talking about his own youth growing up in the 60s and 70s. So he mentions one particular example, which at the time I hadn't come across. So he talks about Chicken Heart, and then he goes on talking about a satirical radio piece, which is, for him, one of the standout examples of this immersive radio experience. We'll play a little bit of that King statement. So this is picking up at the end of his analysis that we talked about last week of Chicken Heart, and then we'll jump into the original, which I managed to find on the YouTubes.
The doctor proclaims in stentorian tones, and the two of them fall directly into the chicken heart. We hear its steady beat, louder, louder, and then the sickly splash that ends the play. Part of Obler's real genius was that when Chicken Heart ended, you felt like laughing and throwing up at the same time. Cue the bombers, an old radio bit used to run. Drone of bombers in the background. The mind's eye visualizes a sky black with flying forts. Drop the ice cream into Puget Sound, the voice continues. Whining hydraulic sound of bomb bays opening, a rising whistle followed by a gigantic splash. All right, cue the chocolate syrup, the whipped cream, and drop the maraschino cherries. We hear a great liquid squishing sound as the chocolate syrup goes, then a huge hissing as the whipped cream follows. These sounds are followed by a heavy plop, plop, plop in the background. And absurd as it may be, the mind responds to these cues. That interior eye actually sees a series of gigantic ice cream sundaes rising out of Puget Sound like strange volcanic cones, each with a maraschino cherry the size of Seattle's Kingdome on top of it. In fact, we see those disgustingly red cocktail cherries raining down, plopping into all that whipped cream and leaving craters nearly the size of Great Tycho. Thank the genius of Stan Freberg. Arch Oboler, a restlessly intelligent man who was also involved in the movies, 5, one of the first films to deal with the survival of...
We'll pause it there. So Stan Freberg, he mentions at the end. So that was Stephen King in his book Danse Macabre, talking about the impact of a well-constructed radio drama piece, exciting the mind's imagination, the eye of the mind, the theater of the mind. So he mentioned Stan Freberg as the creator of that sequence of imagining something really evocatively through audio, through radio. So I've been able to find the original sketch from Stan Freberg, which that was his recollection of, Stephen King's recollection of us. Yeah. So it was first released back in 1966. So we'll listen to it now. It's part of Freberg Underground show number 1. And this piece is called Anybody Here Remember Radio? And it's quite a bittersweet satire of radio. So again, we're at this moment of disruptive technology. So radio, which had dominated the news, dominated entertainment from the 1930s, 1920s on, certainly into the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. 1966, the radio still, of course, exists, as it does now, but had, again, been completely disrupted by the arrival of television. And this is a 1966 bittersweet kind of eulogy of the loss of radio. This kind of blend of nostalgia, which we've had a little bit of articles about already today, and a little bit of absurdist humor and cultural critique. So we'll listen to the piece here. So this is a kind of mock stage performance sketch we're going to hear, where Freberg is playing himself, and he gets interrupted during his stage performance by this child. So we're picking it up at the point that the child is interrupting him during his stage performance, which sends us into this now recognized famous routine that Stephen King talks about in his book, Danse Macabre.
Thank you. And now we'd like to...
Mr. Freberg?
Yes, who are you?
I'm Marianne Feemster. I'm 10 years old. I've been sitting in the audience.
Yes.
I've been thinking over what you said about how you're doing this because there aren't any more radio programs.
Yes.
Mr. Freberg, what's a radio program?
Well, when you listen to the radio in the morning, what do you hear?
Disc jockeys and news, or sometimes news and disc jockeys. Is it possible to hear something else?
It was back in the 1940s, yes.
Back in the olden days?
Yes. There were what we call radio programs, like what we're doing here with actors and live musicians and sound effects men and guest stars.
Oh, you mean like a television program when the picture tube blows out?
Something like that, yes.
What did you look at?
You didn't look at anything. You just listened.
Boy, talk about your radical ideas.
Yeah. Look, dear, you're just too young to remember, I guess. I'll have someone from the audience explain it. Anybody here remember radio? Anybody? Anybody at all?
I do.
Oh, good. Good, here's a lady. Here's a lady. Come right up here, madam. Watch your step, dear. Yeah, you do remember radio programs, do you?
Oh, yes, I remember them.
You used to listen to them, did you?
I did as a girl, yes, my goodness, yes.
Well, for the benefit of this young lady, could you tell us what it was like?
Well, it was, no, dear, I'm trying to remember.
Just take your time.
Well, if my memory serves me correct, we'd hurry to get the dishes done, and we'd all sit around the living room listening to the,
radio.
Radio, that's it.
Pardon me, what did you look at while the radio was on?
Oh, we looked at each other, kinda stared off into space while Inner Sanctum was on, The Whistler, The Shadow, The Weed of Crime Bears Bitter Fruit. Do you know who said that?
Who?
Lamont Cranston, that's who. Compared to him, my dear, James Bond is a fink.
But I still don't know what you used for pictures.
Used your imagination.
Your what?
Look, you could do things on radio, see, that you couldn't possibly do on television. My sound effects man and I will give you a demonstration right now.
Okay.
Okay, people, now, when I give you the cue, I want the 500-foot mountain of whipped cream to be shoved into Lake Michigan, which has been drained and filled with hot chocolate. Then the Royal Canadian Air Force will appear overhead towing a 10-ton maraschino cherry, which will be dropped into the whipped cream to the cheering of 25,000 extras. All right, cue the mountain. Cue the Air Force. Cue the maraschino cherry. Okay, 25,000 cheering extras. Now, you want to try that on television?
I see what you mean.
You see, radio was a very special medium because it stretched the imagination.
But doesn't television stretch the imagination?
Up to 21 inches, yeah.
Mr. Freberg.
Yes.
What did they do with all those radio people? Did they go into a rest home?
No, they went into television, and after about 26 weeks, they went into a rest home. Thanks for being with us.
That was Stan Freberg's Anybody Here Remember Radio, which was the piece discussed by Stephen King in his kind of bittersweet reflection on the significance of radio back in the day, as it was the medium which introduced him to horror, from which he has his earliest memories of being scared. As we heard last episode in his discussion of Chicken Heart. So it's a nice piece by Freberg there. And again, you know, he sets up that classic, you know, kind of disruptive technology moment where you're contrasting the previous technology, radio, the theater of the mind, with a critique of television as a more visual, literal experience. So, you know, he has that line to the girl that's asking him the questions about what radio is, you know, what do you see? And he goes, well, you used your imagination. And the girl's reply is, your what? So again, it's that kind of jab at the critique that was very common back in the day in the 80s, certainly in the 60s, of course, of the passive, the consideration of it being more passive consumption that was encouraged by TV. Of course, there's plenty of active engagement, which theorists such as John Fiske and Henry Jenkins would defend. Nevertheless, what it's interesting here is the discourse surrounding that transition from radio to television, where the medium of radio was seen as demanding more and being better for you. From that demand, that you had to make more of an effort, your imagination worked out more. It was your imagination as well that was occurring, so there was some of your participation in the engagement with the medium that some people would say on the surface doesn't appear to be there with television. It's a fun piece also because it is a bit meta in terms of, you know, the critique that is doing itself is occurring in that medium. You know, the sketch is very self-aware that just as much as he's mourning it, right? Nevertheless, you know, this medium he's in, it's already eclipsed by this stage, right? This radio sketch piece is performed in the very medium that's being eclipsed. So there's a poignancy there. You know, it's yeah. I mean, it's worth tracking down Stan Freberg. He's considered quite a innovator at that point, at the end of the radio drama history and the start of television, or the kind of mainstreaming and increasing success of television. The other part of that sequence that I quite like, of course, was that idea of how quickly things are forgotten from a previous decade or generation. That the child, of course, that was lampooning the idea that she'd already forgotten, had no idea there were no cultural touchstones as to what radio meant. It had just vanished. Radio drum had just disappeared. And the kind of time capsule that had been lost there, or the only way to engage with it was the time capsule. That the old woman that gets trotted out to talk about it, of course, is about that generational disconnect that's being spoken about, as radio had lost that place at home. It was no longer part of a ritual, as she was talking about, where the families gathered, they did the dishes, and then they would sit down and they would listen and they would look at each other. As to whether that's a good or bad thing, I'm not sure. Freberg himself, of course, famously once said, radio was the theater of the mind, while television is the theater of the mindless. So he was certainly staking his claims as to what medium he preferred better. Many people, of course, would probably have been complaining about radio as causing the loss of the technology it subverted, right? Maybe the dominance of books was under threat. There might have been people that were complaining as much as that. Who was it? Plato or Socrates talking about the invention of writing causing the loss of memory. Yeah, as oral cultures transition to a written culture, what did the oral cultures lose? Writing is a dangerous technology. So again, it's fascinating to see these recursive structures that occur through disruptive technology, the poignancy, the nostalgia that's lost from them. So it's well worth dipping into some of these really fascinating insights. We'll pick up some further discussions in coming weeks of other lost time capsules of radio from the past, entering them through writers in the 80s and 90s, recollecting their own childhood listening to radio dramas. So keep listening here to Media Mothership and Edge Radio. We're nearly at the top of the hour now, so some small announcements. We'll be taking a small break. We'll be going on to some field research here in Media Mothership interstate over the next few weeks. So no show for the next 2 weeks for Media Mothership. We'll see if we can put some replays on or something. And then we'll be back with a whole new set of contents in 3 weeks. So, what is that, the 17th, July 17th, I want to say offhand. We'll be back with some new content and exciting investigations into media. So thanks again for listening. This has been Craig Norris for Media Mothership on Edge Radio. If you're interested, show notes for episodes, as well as some of the links, will be available at mediamothership.au. So that's www.mediamothership.au, or via YouTube and Twitch, as well as I'll put the podcast out there, so you'll be able to pick that up at your podcast provider of choice. You can check us out on Facebook and Instagram as well. So enjoy the cold winter weeks ahead, and Media Mothership will be back in 3 weeks on the 17th of July with some new deep dives into audio time capsules of radio and media discussion.